years and nothing phases me. Nothing phases me. And especially teaching San Diego State and teaching incoming freshmen, absolutely nothing phases me. So this last semester, I had a young lady in the front row when she was taking her final. She was so nervous she threw up. That almost fazed me. That almost fazed me. So what I will do though is I'll take the PowerPoint when I get home and I'll download it to the Solana Beach group. And if somebody wants to curate it or keep it or do something with it, because there's a lot of really good graphics in there.
Richard, we have a resident who was sitting here. He said, I have a laptop and I lived on the street, so we're going to have him.
Okay,
So
I'll keep going this introduction.
Keep going. Yeah.
Maybe shut the door.
Sure.
Keep the
heat in.
Yeah, it's a tough winter out here. So, I do get introduced as Dr. Carrico sometimes, and so I always look around to see if my father's behind me. But he's way dead, so hopefully he's not. So, I took a BA in medieval history, medieval and Renaissance history at San Diego State back in the 70s when I got out of the U.S. Army, which was an education in itself. I was just about done with taking my medieval Renaissance history degree. I thought I needed 9 more units, and then I got a transcript. This, of course, was a paper transcript by mail back in the day. And it said, oh, no, you need 3 more units, because one of the classes you took when you were overseas didn't transfer. And so I looked around, found a class, and it was called archaeology. And I'm pretty sure I couldn't spell it, but I took it because it was on Saturday and I was driving truck for a living and raising 2 daughters and on and on and on. So Saturday was the best time. So I took it and I dug a site out in the Spring Valley, and I could give you a talk on archaeology per se, but that's not tonight's talk. And about 6 weeks in, to the excavation, it was a Kumeyaay village, Kumeyaay village called Mete, out in Spring Valley. And I found a big piece of pottery about the size of a tortilla, a small tortilla, corn tortilla. And I measured it and weighed it, and I was down about 1.5 meters. So for those of you not in the metric system, that's about 5 feet, more or less. And I did all the things you're supposed to do with it and sketched it. And my professor came by, a fellow named Dr. Ezel, and he looked at my notes, and he liked me anyhow. He didn't like my ponytail at the time, because he was a Reagan Republican, and it was 1972. But he liked me because I'd been in the military, and I was reasonably articulate, and I was good at what I did, taking notes and stuff. And he said, well, okay, that's all good. Did you close your eyes and rub the inside of the shirt? And I'm going, no, I didn't think to close my eyes and rub the inside of the shirt. I don't remember that part. And he said, do it. So I did, and he asked me what I felt, and I said, well, there's some little indentations. And he goes, yeah, those are the indentations of the Kumeyaay lady who made this 900 years ago. And she cooked with it, and it broke, and you're the next person who touched it. So Monday, I went back and changed my major. Almost literally, I went ahead and finished my medieval Renaissance degree, which, what was I thinking? And then I took a degree in anthropology the next semester, because I had lots of units that went over. So I ended up with a degree in history and a degree in anthropology, and then archaeology is a subset of anthropology. And then I did a master's at San Diego State, and then in 1986, I took a master's at USD, University of San Diego. And then I went to Berkeley for 1 semester, Cal. And then I dropped out because I was done. I'd been in school my whole life, it felt like. I'd been offered to join a business doing what's called cultural resource management. So before all this stuff is built, now you have to do an environmental impact report, right? And this company was brand new, and it had 12 employees. And I became employee number 13, which was not an unlucky number the way it turned out. And we built that company from 13 people to 180. It was called West Tech Services. We did a lot of work up in this area. And then we sold it for a fair amount of money, and I stayed on with a new company that was 300, because they had 120. I can do the math on this. They had 120, we had about 180, 160. And we built that up and got bought by an even bigger company. And I never changed offices. They just kept changing the name on the building and all that. So long story short, 10 years ago, I went to another smaller company called Mooney Associates, who's done a lot of work in this area, and we built that one up, and then we sold it. And then I retired from the cultural resource management business, doing archaeology and biology. And I've been teaching at San Diego State for 20 years by then, part-time. But when the department chair found out I was available, he said, yeah, you need to be here full-time. And I said, as long as I don't have to be on any committees, right? And in academia, you have to be on committees. He said, well, you'll never get tenure. And I said, I don't want tenure. I made more money than the dean. You know, I don't need tenure. This is not my full-time thing. I just want to teach more. So I did. And I retired from that 5 days ago. Yeah. I believe it was 30 years, but according to HR, Human Resources, it was 34. So I lost track. So somebody asked me over lunch today, well, what are you going to do now that you're retired? I said, I'm going to go to Solana Beach, give a talk. So here I am. So sometimes when people say, what do you do? Because I do give a lot of public presentations, I tell them I'm a recovering archaeologist. So what does that mean? It means I had a career, made a fair amount of money, hired a lot of people, trained a lot of good archaeologists doing archaeology, digging up things, both historic and prehistoric, pre-contact and post-contact. I dug Mission San Diego in 1989. If any of you were around back then, very controversial project. Found 60 burials, Native American burials. Documented a lot of things that the Monsignor didn't want documented. I dug Presidio Park, you know, where the actual first mission out to California was in Presidio Park. I know when you go to Mission Valley, they have that big sign in front of Mission San Diego de Acala, and it says California's first mission. They're lying. It was not the first one. There were two on Presidio Hill, and then they finally moved it to where it is today. So my background was archaeology and history, but about 20 years ago, I really got into working with Native American communities. And partially, it was because it was time to start doing that. Anthropologists and archaeologists started needing to deal with the people who they were excavating and not just make up this story based on artifacts. So I always tell my students, it would be like me dumping your backpack out or your purse on a table and trying to define you by those artifacts. It doesn't work that way. I could find out a fair amount about you, maybe, but not quote the truth, not the truth. So tomorrow I'm going up to the Manzanita Reservation up near Campo and meeting with the tribal people up there, because we're going to set up a monitoring program where Native Americans will be hired out of Manzanita to go watch what archaeologists do and work with them. So that's what I've been doing the last, 10-ish years. So, yeah.
Recognize that?
Yeah. I've been there. I have been there.
Yeah. Glasses.
So, it'll be on the travel drive and it will say Oasis probably. Okay, so here's tonight's presentation as a recovering archaeologist. I'm hardly going to mention archaeology at all. It's more about what we know about the Kumeyaay people. There may or may not be a map in this particular PowerPoint. I frankly don't remember.
Where do you want to go?
Oh, go to Oasis Kumeyaay, about 7 or 8, that one? Yeah. Don't repair it, just show it. I'll do repair and see what it does. Well, let's try another program now. try that one. There it goes. That'll work well for us. Can you go to the last slide all the way down to the bottom on the left-hand side there? Yeah, okay. I just need to know where it was going to be over. So, one of the drawbacks, and then go back to the top and we'll start. Yeah. And then I'll come over there.
Okay.
So one of the drawbacks of my style is I have not lectured from notes for 25 or 30 years. Because I either know this or I don't know it. And without being arrogant, I know it. And I teach it and I live it. This, some men have hobbies that we watch football or basketball or go fishing. I don't like American football. Fish run away from me, and so this is in fact what I do. So go up to slideshow. Click on slideshow. From the beginning.
Beautiful.
Okay.
It takes a village.
Excellent. Now I'll go from there.
Okay. All yours.
So, based on the Zoom PowerPoint that you saw back in August or whatever it was, I frankly don't remember, it was last year sometime. Some people wanted to know more about the cosmos of the Kumeyaay people, or their religion, or their astronomy, or maybe how they look at the world. So that's what we're going to cover this evening, but here's one thing I really want to stress. I am not Kumeyaay, I'm not Native American. I always thought I was German, and then my daughter did DNA, and God help me, I'm Irish and English. because my father wasn't the father we thought was my father, and that's a whole other story. Yeah. But I want to start with some terms here, and let me find my little pointer here. Okay, so there may be a map coming up, and if there's not, you basically in the Solana Beach area here and up to roughly Awa Edionda, roughly Carlsbad, you are in what's today called Kumeyaay territory. Kumeyaay territory. If you picked up a book or an article prior to 1975, 1976, this word didn't exist. In literature, the people were called the Digaño. That's because when the Spaniards came into California in 1769, they renamed all the tribes. Partially because they couldn't pronounce them, and partially because it's a way to marginalize people by calling them a name that's not theirs. It's called exogeny. You'll be tested on this. It's called exogeny. About 1972-73, many Digaño did not want to be called that any longer. They believed that that was the name of their oppressors, people who came in and changed their culture and brought diseases and Catholicism, indeed. So it was agreed upon that they would be the Kumeyaay. Not everyone agrees with that amongst the Native American people. At Verona, some of the women called the aunties, the older women there, they still want to be Digaño. And if you use Native American, it freaks them out. They're Indian. They go, I'm an Indian, I'm an American Indian. Why are you calling me Native American? Were you born in America, Richard? And I go, yes, then you're Native American. I go. So there's divergence. So that's what I want to stress about this lecture, is you're getting an anthropological view from a white, male, older professor, not a Native American. Some Kumeyaay would have different views on some of this than I do, for instance. So I don't want you to leave here thinking you've heard all the facets of this. I kind of tell my students, if I were standing behind them, that's a lectern, by the way. I noticed in last night's Republican debate, they kept calling that a podium. That's not a podium, that's a lectern. You stand on a podium. But they were media, they don't know anything. So I would tell my students, history is like that lectern, that from here, you can see the front. I can see the side. Almost none of you can see that side, and none of us, including me, can see the back. That's how history is. And sometimes you need to turn it. I call it a cubist approach. So one of my students over Thanksgiving went home and basically got into a fight with his father over Thanksgiving dinner about American history. And he reported back to me that his father was pretty sure I was a communist. That I was a communist, at least a sympathizer, and I was very anti-American and all these kinds of things. And I actually started emailing with his father, and we found out we had about 80% in common and about 20% not. But he finally got the idea that if you acknowledge some of the things that happened in American history, or any country's history, it makes the history more complete. And it's not to put down America. In fact, compared to some countries, we are trying to do better with how we treated our Native people than some of the others. What makes us unique is the Native people still live here. We didn't kill them all. We tried in some cases, but they're here. There's 20,000 Native Americans living in your county on 19 reservations. So, I know, that's why I give this lecture, because you don't know that. There used to be 18, now there's 19, because Hamul became a reservation. So, we're mainly going to talk about the Kumeyaay. If we went just north of Carlsbad, Awe Erionde, it would be the Luiseno, named after what mission? San Luis Rey. So Luiseno means the little people of the mission. The little people. Diegueño was the little Diegueño people of Mission San Diego. So what would San Gabriel be? Gabrieleño. This is what they did up and down the state. They grew up near the Bay Area, San Francisco, instead of being the Ohlone, they were called the Costanoan, the people of the coast. So this is how you erase history, in a way. You start getting rid of names. The Kapana witch, we're just talking to a lady, and her family is Kupeño. That's the more correct, if you will, name. Kapana witch means people who sleep in the water, the hot springs of Warner Springs. So where did I come from today? I came from Warner Springs. That's where I live. It was 29 degrees last night, and I was glad I had gone out and chopped firewood yesterday. So the Kapana witch are Kupeño around Warner Hot Springs, like Henshaw, that area. The Kauai, largely Riverside County, a little bit in our county. So we're going to focus on the Kumeyaay. So what's prehistoric mean? Well, for years we talked about before Columbus got here, Christopher Columbus, in 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Yeah, that was prehistory. And then after that it became history. Well, just because Columbus, and he was lost, just because Columbus got to the Caribbean islands in 1492 and started writing about the native people, prehistory might have ended there, December 1492, but it didn't end in San Diego until 1542, or 1592, or 1769. So we're kind of getting away from prehistoric and using the word pre-contact, because it varies wherever you are in America. You know, Roanoke Island, Spanish experience in the Caribbean, Mexico City, 1560. So I'm going to use pre-contact. And then this one, I won't spend a lot of time on, this is more for my classes. For years, Europeans, especially the French and British and what became Germany, had this thing about civilization, and there were categories of being civilized. And who was at the top? English, exactly. And the Irish were somewhere way down, but the English. And for the Germans, of course, it was the Germanic people, the Bavarians, and for the French, and it still is true, it was the French. I love the French, but they've got their own little thing going on there. And then every other country would be based on, or tribe, how close you were to that group that saw you. And the main criteria was, did you believe in Jesus? Did you believe in Christianity? Did you speak English? Did you know the Bible? Did you have metal? Did you work metal? So all these European traits, none of which have anything to do, frankly, with being civilized. So I like the definition that I think Margaret Mead came up with at one point in joking, that a civilized culture was one that looked out after its old people. It's one who treated their children fairly. It's one who helped disabled people. Maybe that's more civilized. we tend to look at civilization by technology, right? We truly do. And by that criteria, the German Third Reich was highly civilized, right? I mean, they had serious technology. So I'm going to use the word civilization for the Kumeyaay people because they were in fact highly civilized. So my little lights went out here. There it is. Oh, good, we got it out. Okay, so here we are. And California has every Native American language spoken in America, except one. Except one. It's a very small group of people called the Zuni. They made my bracelet. The Zuni language is unlike any other language in America. Pardon? Yeah. It's extremely rare. So, Hokan is a big language group like Latin. And then you have Spanish, Portuguese, and the derivations of the Latin language. As you can see, it was a very large language. It's the oldest language. So people who study language, and I am not one of them, are called glottochronology. They do glottochronology. And they say that language is at least 5,000 years old in California. Okay. And then you can see the other languages. And of course, the Numi people have a lot of territory, but it's the desert. It's the desert. So these are the major languages. So the Kumeyaay speak Hokan. The Luiseno, just north of us, speak Takik. They could hardly talk to each other. They shared very few words in common, like 1 out of 1,000. 1 out of 1,000. The Yuman, who are the Kumeyaay, their territory went all the way to the Colorado River and 86 miles south to Santo Tomas, Baja California. It's a very large area, and probably population of about 20,000.
When was that population, 20,000?
Well, based on, I'm not going to get too far in the weeds with this, but there are anthropologists called econometricians, and they study the carrying capacity of the land. So in a pre-contact society, without metal tools, without the wheel, without horses, without oxen, how many people could that land support? An old view said, well, San Diego County could probably only have supported about 11,000 people. That's because whoever did that study didn't look at the Pacific Ocean and realized how much food can come out of the ocean. Incredibly, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So the numbers got adjusted to about 18 to 20 is what's called the carrying capacity of the land versus the desert has a very low carrying capacity. We know based on Spanish documents, and I have read every mission record from 1769 to 1835. Every death, every burial, every baptism, and every marriage. And based on those numbers, I think there was about 20,000. So 18 to 20,000. But who's counting? So this is a map I made for an article that's about to get published. We're just about up here. These are the major villages of San Diego County. How do I know this? Well, archaeologically, we found most of them, many of them, but these all appear in mission records. They baptized over 6,000 Native American people at Mission San Diego. 4,000 of them are buried at the mission. Your life expectancy when you went in the mission was 6 to 8 years. So you got Catholic, but you died. So here's Mission San Diego, and the village was called Kumeyaay. Here's the Presidio. So we'll come up what was old 101. Hamo, any of you probably not, go to the Pacific Beach Drive-In Theater. Well, I went there because I grew up in that area, and sometimes I went in the trunk. So whoever was driving didn't have to pay for an extra person. Sometimes I went in the trunk with my girlfriend. And I saw no reason to get out and see the movie sometimes. Right? But that's where this was. It's where Grand and Balboa come down and hit old 101. So that's the village of Hamo. Onap is San Clemente Canyon. Istawa is Sorrento Valley, where the coaster station is. This is a double L pronounced as a Y, right? And the J is kind of a like La Jolla, so it's Hiyakawa. And that's Del Mar. That's Del Mar, a little bit inland near the polo grounds. That's where that village was. And then we just kind of keep coming up here. Apamu is in Ramona. Tawi, this is Lake Henshaw. This is Capeño. I live right there. Right there. Mataguay, Boy Scout camp, big Boy Scout camp. So we could go, this is a whole other talk. But I want to point out that the Kumeyaay they were not aggressive people, but they protected their women and their food source and their land. And they thought they were getting overwhelmed by the Spaniards once Mission San Diego got to Mission Valley in 1774. And so in 1775, they attacked it, burnt it to the ground, killed Father Jaime and 2 other people. So the red dots are the villages that took part in the sacking of Mission San Diego. So this is part of a much larger article, but I'm trying to point out that the Kumeyaay are divided into 2 groups, the Tipai and the Ipai. Ipai meaning northern people, Pai is people, and Tipai is southern people. Only the Tipai attacked the mission. The Ipai did not. Even though they'd had rapes, they'd had terrible things happen at Onap, at Istawa, because it was a clan organization, and all these villages were linked together. There were alliances. So this just gives you sort of a lay of the land. So if I had time, I could have stuck another map on top of this and show you where the reservations are. Are any of them along the coast?
No.
No. Mission Valley? No. Good farmland? No. No. A colleague of mine, Florence Shippick, wrote a book called Pushed Into the Rocks, the story of San Diego's reservations. And it's true. So the closest one to the coast is Sequan or Hamul. Yep. Hamul, which means sweet water, by the way. Sweet water, Hamul. Las Choyas, now on my new map, Choyas is a cactus, right? The Kumeyaay word for this is Peshna, which means cactus. Means thorny plant. Means thorny plant. In Spanish, learned that. This is where 28th Naval Station is, 28th Street Naval Station, at Old Harbor Drive. Utai. Tecate is a Kumeyaay word. It's not Spanish. It means knife. And it's not on here, but Tiquan, and by the way, it's not Tijuana, it's Tiquan, it's Kumeyaay. And it means good place to be. In high school, for me, it was a good place to go. Cheap haircuts, go to La Special, get some tacos. It was a good place. See the zebra, right? So-called zebras. So this is the Kumeyaay territory, all the way out to the Colorado River. This is Manzanita Reservation. This is Campo. And Hakum. Okay. So I'm going to go through this reasonably quick, because otherwise this will go on forever and ever and ever. This is roughly what the Kumeyaay would have looked like. These happen to be Mojave, who lived out in the Mojave River, Mojave Desert. This was a sketch made in about 1850, 1855. So what's going on here? They did a lot of body painting, a lot of tattooing. So when tattoos first got really popular again in young culture, I would tell them, you're not doing anything new. The Kumeyaay were doing this thousands of years ago. The Polynesians were doing it thousands of years ago. So you just happen to have sleeve tattoos. But this would have been a bark skirt or deerskin skirt. Rarely wore anything on the top. The men would have a little loincloth, and the body paint typically reflects your clan. There's a style that you use to represent your clan. I would kind of compare it, and I don't mean this badly, to like the gangs up in Los Angeles, the Crips and the Bloods. So if you've got a red handkerchief, you don't want to go into a neighborhood where there's blue handkerchiefs. Bad things can happen to you. So this was a way of self-identifying yourself. No big headdresses, a couple feathers, typically eagle. beautiful baskets. I have a basket at home that holds water. You could cook in it, not over a fire, but by putting hot rocks into it and bringing the temperature up. Not usually sandals, short bow, lots of arrows. So this would have been what the Spaniards would have first seen, and the Mexicans. By the time of the Americans, they were wearing more clothes. Screwed that up. What's the slide after that? Okay. So here's the cosmos part. So we've established they were the Kumeyaay, Ipai and Tipai, and they had an amazing knowledge of the sky. You don't need to build a Stonehenge or an observatory to predict the solstices. You can do it with a stack of rocks. You can do it by a cave, and light comes through and shines on the wall, and you paint it. And this is what they did in some cases. So tonight, I don't know what the night sky is like out here. I live up in Warner's, and the night sky is amazing. I had my granddaughters up there when they were little, 15 years ago. Now they all graduated from college. And they looked up one night and they said, "Wow, what's that cloud?" I go, "That's the Milky Way." That's why it's called the Milky Way. It kind of looks filmy and milky. So the Kumeyaay knew about that. If you can go out tonight, probably by the time we're done, and you look roughly southeast a little bit, you'll see what we call Orion, right? The hunter, the 3 stars in a row. And before that, it's probably down by now, is the Pleiades, the 6 or 7 beautiful girls, right? The Kumeyaay called those the 6 beautiful girls. The Japanese called them the 6 beautiful girls. Any of you own a Subaru? What's the symbol on the back of the Subaru? Stars. It's the Pleiades. So some cultures see the same things in stars, others see completely different. If you don't have a dragon in your culture, I mean, not like dragons exist anyhow, but if you don't have a dragon, you don't see a dragon. The Kumeyaay see a snake, because snakes are very, very important. Milky Way is super important. It's where spirits go. So we're going to touch on a little bit on that, and I'm going to stress to you that any science that you can pretty much dream up that would have been in existence in the Renaissance, the Kumeyaay had that. They had chemistry. They knew how to make paint, right? So you take a piece of charcoal and you grind it up, and you add some cactus juice to it, and now you've got a paste, but it's not going to stick together. And so what else do you need? You need an oil. So then you get those wild cucumbers that grow on sumac and bushes that are parasite. They look like a spaceship with thorns coming out of them. You cut it open, get the wet seeds out, get the juice, add that to the paint, to the charcoal, and to the cactus juice, and now you've got a paint. It's an organic paint. A colleague of mine just dated some rock paintings up in this area, inland, and they were 800 years old. Most of the paints that we have are not going to last 800 years, right? Yeah, so 800 years, embedded into the rock, essentially. So they were chemists, they were astronomers, they predicted the solstice by when Orion comes up at a certain time of the night, that's the first day of winter. And it's either the 20th, 21st, or 22nd of December. Other planets come up, other constellations come up, and that's spring. It's time to plant. The frosts are going to go away now. Doesn't mean they always do, by the way, but you know, pretty close. So astronomers, they had a basic math system. They didn't need to count any further than 10, because after that it was pretty much a duplication of numbers. They had 6 months in the year, because the months are duplicated twice. So 6 months in their year. Pretty good. So lots of stuff going on. So this is Auntie Jane Dumas, who was a good friend of mine for 30 years. And every time I hung out with Jane, she's died about 10 years ago, I believe, she made me feel stupid. And sometimes she went out of her way to tell me I was. Right? So she was a healer, a Kumeyaay healer, lived down in Hamu. Her mother was a healer back in the 1910-1920 period, who was actually arrested and put in jail for practicing medicine without a license. She was basically taking white sage when it's wet and fresh, and pounding it and making a salve to put on your chest for a chest cold. And they arrested her. They arrested her. Crazy stuff, right? But you could go to the store and buy Vapor Rub, Vicks Vapor Rub, and then that's okay. Because some big pharma company made that. So she's out here with me well, I'm with her actually, out in the desert, right off of the drop off from Julian, and she's showing me white sage. This is one of the most important plants. And for tonight's topic, as the cosmos, it's a sacred plant that the Creator very specifically gave them this plant so that they could use it. So most of the plants that are really important are called out in their creation story or in other oral traditions. If you go to a powwow and you hear bird singers singing certain songs, a lot of times they're singing about plants. It's a travelogue, and the song is where to go to find this plant. Where to go find this particular plant. Where's the best buckwheat? What time should we go to the mountains and get the acorns? When's the ocean going to have the best fish? When are the lobsters going to be good? An archaeological site that I excavated in Sorrento Valley, we found hundreds of abalone shells. They were eating 6 and 8 pound abalones. If you bought one of those today down at the fish market, I can't even imagine what you pay, $45 for an abalone. So my point is, she's showing me this plant, and she's giving me later, if you dry it, and then you use it as a tea, it's very good for your digestion. You can pound it, use it for a salve. Kumeyaay, burn it. They dry it and burn it. It's called smudging, and it's basically to clarify the air. I was going to bring one and fire it up, but last time I did that, fire alarms went off. So I'm not going to do that. And we'd spent I don't know, 2 hours on this side of the canyon over here, and she was showing me a plant called Yerba Santa, which is a healing plant. And she gave me the Kumeyaay name for it. We talked about its uses, and you want to pick it when a certain time of the year. And then we were on this side, and we went up to this plant, and she said, "So, Richard, what is that?" And I go, "Well, it's Yerba Santa." She goes, "And what's the Kumeyaay name?" Which I'd forgotten. But I told her, and she goes, "Good, good. And when do you harvest it?" And I said, "You harvest it in the early spring, but not after late spring, because by then all the medicinal qualities have gone away, a lot of them. And what do you use it for?" "Well, it's good for an eye wash. It clears up bad eyes, basically." And she goes, "Okay, and what else?" And I told her a couple of other things, and she said, "Sometimes you are the stupidest smart man I've ever met." And I said, Auntie, why?" And she goes, "That side of the canyon is for women, and this side is for men. Feel that leaf. This one's not fuzzy, right, on the bottom?" And I go, "No, that's the male plant. The female plant's fuzzy under the leaf. You don't want to mix these up, Richard. This is very bad." You weren't paying any attention at all. And she was right. I wasn't hearing the female pronoun when she kept saying she would use it for this, she would do this with it, and on and on and on. So they were also pharmacists, right? And this plant was given by the Creator specifically for their use. If you were not of Kumeyaay and you wanted to come into their territory and pick some white sage or chia or buckwheat, you could, but you had to get permission first, and you need to bring gifts. One of the reasons they didn't trust the Spaniards is the Spaniards didn't bring any gifts. They came in and took and took and took, and they kept saying, "What are you going to give us back besides syphilis, and Catholicism, and smallpox, and malaria, and all of those?" Really important plant, agave. So if you've never eaten an agave root, you have to dig it up. And the agave root can be 5 to 8 pounds, roughly. And you peel it like you would a pineapple or something, you back off the sides of it, and then you bury it in an earth oven, along with a lot of others under the ground. You cover it up, and depending on the outside temperature and the size of the root, it can take 10 to 12 hours. But when you dig it up, it's like a 5-pound artichoke heart. It is so yummy. I cheat. I bring mayonnaise or lemon juice when I go to some of the agave roasts because I like the taste of it. And they put other spices on them. It's got lots of nutrients in it, lots of electrolytes, lots of sugar. This is what tequila is made out of. Right? My favorite drink. Way in front of water. Way in front of water is tequila. But this is the gray agave, not the blue agave. These tips, you pull this off, you pound it, and you get thread from it. This is what you make your sandals out of. This is what you sew with. It's a very resilient thread before the Europeans brought in cotton thread. The tips of that, the Apache would use to torture people. So there are accounts of U.S. cavalrymen being captured by the Apache, and they would stick this in their eye. And what it's toxic. So after the pain goes away, you're going to probably go blind. So it's a plant that can be toxic on the top and yummy on the bottom. Like a lot of plants are sometimes, right? Yeah. So just an amazing plant. This is ephedra. Some of you might know ephedra. It used to be more common in our drugs. We've taken it out. A lot of cough medicines and other medicines have ephedra in them. It's a natural plant. You pound this up, excuse me, and mix it with some tea, and it tends to cure your headaches. It also tends to speed you up. It's got natural benzodrine in it, so it speeds you up. It's also called Mormon tea. So the Mormons wouldn't drink coffee, but they would drink a tea made out of ephedra. So, okay. How much would you have to get a good cup of tea? You'd probably need this whole batch right here, and you would pound it. So cosmologically, by the way, before you would harvest this, you would say a prayer for it. I know this sounds silly to us in America. You know, I don't say a prayer before I take a bear aspirin. And I don't say a prayer to the cow that's on my plate, you know, my prime rib. But they did, because to them, this plant died for them. It was doing fine, it was living, and you whacked it off, and you made something out of it. There was a time, maybe a slide here, I'm not sure, coming up, when animals were human, and humans were animals. And only the animals talk and sang. Humans didn't, because we were stupid. We hadn't learned it. The Creator didn't give us that. But the Creator told the animals, you need to teach these humans how to talk and how to burn their dead, how to do this, how to dance. You coyotes, they're always out there dancing and singing. You need to teach this to the humans. So they did. So if you go to a powwow and you heard bird singers, that's sometimes what the bird singers are doing. They're emulating the birds because the birds taught them all the languages, all the songs. So it's a very layered onion, if you will. Okay. This happens to be a painting that's on a bakery down in Lemon Grove. But it's pretty accurate. So you've got a woman here in her, this is a bark skirt, by taking the bark off of oak trees or other trees, and then you pound it. I mean, you get paper from wood, right? You pound it and you make a bark skirt. The basket is a pretty, actually typical, if you will, typical Kumeyaay basket. This design is not painted on, it's woven in as you're doing it, different colors. And oftentimes they would actually use poison oak, the branches of poison oak, which they were immune to. And I was until about 5 years ago, and then my luck ran out. I guess because I hadn't been out in the field enough, but they were pretty much immune to it. We've got an oak tree growing back here, little creek. This is called a wa, W-A, a wa, a house. So the proportion's kind of funky here, but it would be about as big as this area right in here. And subterranean, so they would dig it out and build the wa. They would use willow branches for the superstructure, and then onto that they would put tule and grass mats. And then if it rotted or a rat ate it or you had a fire, you just pull that mat off and put on another mat. It's pretty good. By digging it 2 or 3 feet down, you bent over to get in, but once you got in, you would stand up. You would stand up. Plus, in the summertime, it's cooler. The further down in the earth you go, the cooler the earth is, right? Okay. So that's all going on. Got the guy back here with his bow and arrow. She's doing a more elaborate basket. If you want to see some of these crafts still going on, the Verona Cultural Museum and St. Juan both, and the little shop down in Old Town called the Kosoy Shop, they sell baskets and pottery made by the native people, mainly south of the border, because they're still doing this. There are 2 or 3 villages down there where Kumeyaay is the first language. So my Spanish is okay, but when they switched to Kumeyaay, It might as well be Polish, or who knows what language. And they still sing their songs in Kumeyaay. So there have been Native Americans from up here who went down there to learn their own language, to learn the traditional songs, because they got lost up here. They got shoved out. They weren't acceptable, if you will. So this is a larger house called a wa. And by the way, if it were up here, the Ipai Tipai have slightly different dialects. That's what makes them different. And so a dialect is like an accent, but a little more pronounced, a little more profound. So my ex-business partner, Brian Mooney, grew up in Boston. God help him. He grew up in Boston. And when I first met him, back in 1970, one day he called me Ricardo. Ricardo, let's go down to the harbor, get in your car, we'll go to the harbor and have a party, and you can buy some beer. And I said, what did you just say? Are you asking me, do I have to go potty? And that's a dialect. Y'all, in parts of Texas or the South, right? Do you say Caribbean or Caribbean? It's actually a dialectical difference, not in the Marxian way, but dialectical difference. So for the Southern people, there's a glottal stop, that kind of Germanic catch in your throat, wah, wah. For the Ipai up here, it's a E-wah, and there's like an E in front of it, E-wah, instead of wah, differences. And then over the years, people who live in the North have adopted the language of the South, and the Southerners have adopted the North. So if you go to Campo, you'll hear one man will say Iwa, and the other one will go Ikwa. What's wrong with you? Why don't you pronounce it right? Right? So dialects. This is again, you can almost see the maps right here. That's a map. Sometimes they would use cottonwood as well as willow. Pretty nice oya, a vessel, and a basket. This is what, 1924. At Campo. They had ceremonial chambers. Certain healers lived in certain houses part-time because that's when they were making magic. That's when they were making medicine. It's when they were listening to the Creator. It's when they were singing songs that no one else got to hear. And those wa were set off away from all the others. They were literally ceremonial chambers. Ceremonial chambers. Okay. This is on the cover of my book back there. So if you want to know more about this, especially in the historic period, you can get that book. It's in a few libraries as well. This is El Capitan Mountain here in San Diego, not the one up in Yosemite, and also called El Cajon Mountain. If you wanted to go to this exact spot today, you go out 8, you get off at the Lake Jennings exit, you go north till it ends at the lake. At Capitan Reservoir Lake. You get in a canoe, you go out in the middle, and you look 120 feet down, that's where this is. That's where this is. We drove them out in 1935 so the city of San Diego could build a dam in front of the reservation and take the water to North Park. Because North Park and Talmadge Park, they needed water, and they sucked it out of Mission Valley. So I've actually interviewed, this is 1930. This is 5 years before they were moved out. One group went to Viejas. There was no reservation there. They went to Viejas, and the other group went to Verona. So you had 2 different groups of people from here. So I interviewed her granddaughter. Her granddaughter's still alive, well, she was. And she loved this picture with a little chicken. They had orchards, they had a school, they had a church, and this is a mortar and a pestle, primarily for grinding acorns. So if you've ever been in the backcountry and you see those bedrock with all the holes in them, there's an oak tree somewhere, not very far away. The only reason you need mortars is either for choke cherry, hollyleaf cherry, or acorns. You don't grind chia or buckwheat. You just do that on the surface. You bring it out here and grind it. Bring it out here. She's a Neho, by the way. If you know some of the Native American names, Neho is a pretty common name at Mesa Grande and Manzanita and all that. Yep. She was taken away to an Indian school, by the way. Yep. But she got along. She learned how to make lace, she learned how to cook, she learned all kinds of things, she said, up in Sherman, up in Riverside County, and she met her future husband up there. Sophie asked her, for her granddaughter, about how was your grandmother's experience in Indian school. Oh, she liked it. She got 3 meals a day, and she pretended to be Christian, and she met her husband, and she came back, and it was a pretty good life. But if you talk to other people, it was terrible. And depending on where you were, right? Depending on where you were. So this is underneath Capitan Grande Reservoir. And where did the water go, by the way? They built a big tank on University Avenue, El Cajon, and Idaho, right by the chicken pie shop. So if you go there and you see that big water tower, that's a newer one. That was 1940, but that's where the water went. This is Pamu. I don't know if any of you hike much, but if you do, you could go to Ramona, and you could go to the Ramona Grasslands Reserve Park there. It's off of Highland Valley Road and 67. And this is the old Indian Trail down to Poway, down to San Pasqual Valley, and then it became the Butterfield Stage Route. And then later it was an automobile road. And now it's part of this trail system. So here's all these borders. This was a 680-acre parcel that a client of mine purchased cash back in 1997, I think. I don't remember what he paid for 650 square mile, 640 acres. The dot-com bubble was bursting, and his son-in-law saw it coming and sold his company over in Arizona, and they bought this land for cash. And they had a plan. They were going to build a huge golf course and 600 homes, and on and on and on. So he hired my company to do all the environmental studies. So literally $1 million later, in the year $2,000, he sold it to the county, because there was no way he could build here and make it pencil out. There were gnat catchers, there were horned toads, there were butterflies. This is the village of Pamu. These mortars, we found 800 of them. 800 of them. We did some test pits. We went down about 2 meters, about 6 feet, and the bottom was 4,000 years old. It was an amazing sight. We found cremations, so we worked with the native people and got them reburied somewhere. So all of this now is open space preserve. That gentleman hates my guts. I stopped getting Christmas cards from him that year, but he sold it for a lot more than they paid for it. So kind of a win-win. So this is an easy trail. Most of you don't ride mountain bikes, but you can ride your mountain bike out here, and horses. So it's called the Ramona Grasslands Preserve. Altogether, it's 2,500 acres, and you can actually take a trail and end up down in San Pasqual Valley. If you were going to do that, you'd want to spot a car down there. You don't want to come back up. Pamu means place where the people sang. Place where the people sang. This is not Pomo Valley, it's behind this one. This is where the original village of Pamu was. The Spaniards attacked this in 1778, set some houses on fire, shot people as they came out the door, and collected 12 sets of ears, and took the leaders down to the Presidio and tortured them. Father Serra, to his credit, petitioned to have these men released. He said the commandant had no authority to go up here and do this. He's acting outside the bounds. And the viceroy down in Mexico wrote a letter to the commandant, Rivera Moncada, and said, you need to let these people go. Well, what were you doing attacking these people? Well, I heard they were unhappy. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. And then Sarah was going to excommunicate him, by the way, too. So he let them go. And they promised to come back to church every other Sunday. They never came back. In fact, they told him, now come up again. We'll see how this works out. The village of Pamu. Most of what I'm telling you, by the way, appears in different articles that you could read. So most Americans, I suppose, unless they're from Asia, look up at the moon and see a man on the moon, because that's how we are. We're narcissistic. We want to see our own face in the moon. It's got to be a man, not a woman. It's a man on the moon. The Kumeyaay in many Asian cultures see a rabbit. They don't see a man. So I don't want you to imagine Bugs Bunny or the face of a rabbit. This is the Energizer Bunny. So here's his ears, there's his head and body, and there's his little fuzzy tail. He's running. It's the Energizer Bunny. So it's Luna de Conejo in Spanish, but in Kumeyaay, it's rabbit in the moon, rabbit in the globe. And why does he go away sometimes and become small and small and small? It's because Coyote's out there, and Coyote eats him. And he keeps biting on him and biting on him and biting on him, and pretty soon he's gone. And then even though the creator had told Coyote not to do that, he did, because he's a coyote, and he gets sick, and he starts throwing up. And the moon comes back. It's a whole different way of looking at the moon. A whole different way of looking at the moon. Yeah. And this moon lives, by the way, at Mount Woodson. If you know where Mount Woodson is, 67, when you go into Ramona, that really nice mountain off to the side. This is where the moon lives at night. If you're on the east side of the moon. If you're on the west side, it makes no sense, because you see it go in the ocean. Right? But the people on the east side say, oh yeah, that's the rocks where the rabbit sleeps. Or rabbit's home. Rabbit's home. This is Mount Woodson, called Moon Rock. Somewhere up here, and I haven't found it yet, an anthropologist in 1925 recorded a story, a guy named J.P. Harrington, one of my heroes. And in that story, there was this monster, not a monster, a giant, called Tochipe. And Tochipe started out by Yuma, and in 4 steps got to La Jolla. And by the way, La Jolla is not a Spanish word. It does not mean the jewel. You will never see the jewel in Mexico spelled Jolla. That's like crazy talk. It's either Joya or Hoya. It's a made-up word based on a Kumeyaay word called Mat Lahoy. Mat being land, Lahoy being holes in the land. So the real name for La Jolla is place where there's holes in the land. The cove, the caves. Right? So Tochipe wants to go to Mat Lahoy because he's heard Spider Woman is out there. I don't want you to think, you wouldn't like my students as much. I don't want you to think of some beautiful woman who wears a spider outfit and hangs out with Spidey. This is a woman, a full-blown woman, whose clan is the Spider clan. And she guards Mat Lahoy. And she's beautiful. And he wants to go out there and hang out with her. It's a very long story, we don't have the time tonight, but his 3rd step on the way to La Jolla was right up here somewhere, and he stepped on a rock about the size of this room and left his footprint in it. I've got a photograph of it from 1925. I've looked at it from Google Earth. Next week I'm taking a drone out there, and I'm going to find this sucker. I've been looking for it for 3 years now. It's out there somewhere, and the story is that's what he pressed on the rock. And when the anthropologist asked the Native American, well, rocks are hard. And the Native American, being a good geologist, said, not when Tochipe came through, the rocks were soft. They were young. They were young. So, this is a heck of a hike, by the way, if you're not in shape. You go up 1,200 feet in less than a half a mile. So, it's strenuous in that sense. You'll see lots of people, lots of rock climbers go out here and practice their rock climbing. Here's how you winnow your seeds. So you got your winnowing basket. She's already pounded this acorn. She's got it down to some pretty good sized pieces. Now she wants the chaff to go away. So she's winnowing it. And then she's going to put it in another vessel. These are acorns. And Quercus dumosa. And she's going to leach it. Have you ever eaten a raw acorn? I should have brought some in. It's like eating 2 tea bags. It's got a phenomenal amount of tannic acid. So you want to leach the acid out of it by running warm water over it, and then the water comes out. What do you do with the water? Tannic acid. You tan hides with it. It breaks down the fiber in the hide. These are smart people. These are civilized people. These are civilized people. This is also, by the way, underwater. And this was after a big fire in 1930, up on the hills. Yeah. basket. So this is a whole story, and as the woman made this basket for me, I stayed down south of the border for about a week when I commissioned a basket, and I said, how long is this going to take? I knew better than asking that. She goes, as long as the song takes. And I go, okay, is it like a short song or a long song? You know? And she basically said, how long are you down here, Ricardo? And I said, about a week. And she said, it won't be done. Maybe you should come back at Christmas. This is June. Maybe at Christmas time it'll be done. So I don't know how long it actually took her, but there's a whole series of songs involved here. This happens to be a cactus. This is a thunderbird. This is probably corn, another thunderbird. This is Tochape, who he's disguised here as like a beetle, a bug on the ground, because he could shapeshift. He could shapeshift. So when I went down to pick up my basket, it was ridiculous. So this is 30 years ago, so roughly in 1990. She wanted $40 for it. That's all she wanted for it. And I said, I can't do that. And she said, what else you got? I don't need any more money. Well, I'd been going down there for a long time. I said, I got 4 cartons of Marlboro Red, a case of Hershey bars, and some MJB coffee. And she said, done. So mathematically, I just had this appraised for insurance reasons, is $1,200. Yeah, and all this is natural colors, by the way. This is not dyed. This is not dyed. Yeah. Incredibly beautiful. So somebody said, why have you done this and stayed doing this thing that you do? And the reason is because I've been blessed. In that sense, I get to work with real people and artifacts and culture. So we're just going to buzz through these. This is jasper from a place called Dos Cabezas out in the desert. That's a dark point. You can kind of see how long it is. It's an inch. So it's a little over 2 1/4, 2.5 inches. This is 5,000 years old. This was from a site, if you know where the Crosby Estates golf course is, along Del Dios. Some of those golf course holes, greens, are on top of this site. So we preserved the site and covered it over because it was so extensive. The bottom, we got down, that must be about 10 feet, right? We got down 9.5, 10 feet, so deep the water was coming out of the ground. And OSHA, you know, the people who do safety, they would have killed me. We didn't have any scaffolding, just these big pits. So this is a dark pit. This would have been used to hunt pretty large game. You don't use this on a rabbit. This is deer. We used to have a lot of antelope. Used it on antelope. These are probably knife blades. That's a dark point. And that's probably an unfinished dark point, because sometimes they break as you're manufacturing them. We sent this one off to a lab up at UC Berkeley, and they came back and said, well, what do you want to know about it? And I said, well, did you do DNA on it? Yeah. Well, tell me. Well, it was both deer and antelope. So they used it for more than one animal, apparently. Both deer and antelope. One of the knife blades, not one of these, I said, they called me, which no one calls anybody anymore, right? It's all text, and said, hey, tell me more about this site. So I told them, they go, well, you got human blood on this knife blade. And I go, both sides? And he goes, nope, just one side. And I go, yeah, well, the guy was carrotless like I am when I'm chopping carrots probably then. So the other side had rabbit on it, and one side had human blood on it. And now you can link the DNA back to other parts of America and across the ocean. So, amazing stuff you can do these days. None of that existed 30 years ago. One button. Arrow points. So these are used on deer and small game, but probably not rabbits. You can kill a rabbit with a wood arrow point, a sharp stick, and they have throwing sticks. This one was actually in a cremation. This was not made to shoot. It was made to bury with somebody. This has been repatriated back to the Manzanita tribe and reburied, by the way, and reburied. Yep. So this is the archaeology part of this. This quartz here, by the way, is a sacred rock. And we do have quartz crystals in San Diego County, where the light comes through like a prism. So rocks can be very important too, not because they were ever human, but because the Creator put them for humans to use. But there's spirituality in some of the rocks. I think there's 5 or 6 slides left. Otherwise, I'll keep you all night. This is Rancho Bernardo. This is in the guy's backyard. Above what used to be the Safeway. I don't know what it is now. And it's about 8 feet tall. Exactly. So this is the artistic side of these civilized people. These are frets. Sometimes they're true maze designs. These happen to be frets, very similar to what you would see if you went to Greece. To Pompeii, for instance, one of the rooms there has this all the way around the wall. This is the one that's 8,000 to 9,000 years old. The archaeologist was allowed to go in and take an itty bitty piece, and then took some out here too, just to make sure it wasn't something about the rock, but it was the paint. And they said, well, here's what's in that paint. It's red, which is ochre or hematite. Sometimes they use blood, sometimes human blood, otherwise deer or rabbit blood. So it had blood in it, animal blood for the red. It had, the oil was indeed from California curcubata cucumber pod, but instead of having cactus juice, it had stink bug juice, which has amino acids in it that binds everything together. So my friends at Berkeley just amaze me with what they can do. I was born too soon. What do you see in that picture? A bird. What kind of bird? A dove or a quail? Yep. So this is a place called La Rumorosa down in Baja California. It's about 41 miles outside of Tecate. You go through Tecate, you go across the railroad tracks, you get on the toll road, and you head towards Mexicali, head east. This is at 5,000 feet elevation. It snowed there this morning, very lightly, because I know one of the guards down there, he calls me up, oh, it's snowing, Nevada. I'm like, oh yeah, cool. So this is a bird, and down there at La Rumorosa, these are all formed by wind and by water. This used to be under the ocean. At almost 5,000 feet. This was under the ocean, so wave action and then later the wind. So I was given a tour down there, because I do take tours down here, and I was talking about it, and these two older Pai women, Pai meaning people, came up and kind of listened to my English, and then they said, when I was pretty well done, can you say in Espanol now? I go, yeah, I guess. So in my broken Spanish, I told my story, and then I asked them about this bird, and they said, I asked them, I said, so in my culture, this would have been a bird that got turned into a rock, because that happens a lot, right, in the Bible and other readings. And she looked at me like I was crazy, and she said, no, senor, it's always been a rock. Siempre en roca. No. Why would a bird turn into a rock? And I go, just asking. She said, no, it's always been a rock. It's always been a rock. But the Creator put it here. And there are quail. People still call quail hunting. Not here, because it's in a park now. But they go down there, and we did an excavation, and we found quail bone, antelope bone, and lots of pine pollen. So, a board. I think it's coronis in Espanol. So I got a grant about 7 years ago for a 3-year project. So if you do the math on that, it took 4 years longer than it should have. But as my Native American friend said, well, you're an archaeologist, Richard. What's time matter to you? Yeah, good point. So I had a grant. For 3 years, I was going to write, and I did. It took 7. What's called the ethnography of the Kumeyaay, about their religion, their cosmology, their plants, their language. And one of the things the Kumeyaay wanted, this was top down, this was from them telling me what we want you to write about. Not how to write it, but we don't want the word archaeology even mentioned. Unless you just can't help yourself. But you need to go interview elders, which you've been doing for 30 years anyhow. You need to go read Spanish documents. So they wanted place names. They wanted to know what the names were on the land before the Spaniards got here, and the Americans. So this slide's out of date. I've now got 450 place names, And the report's in, it's 510 pages, and now we're looking for a publisher. But which ones do we know about here? Well, here's Tiquan. Hamul, which is now with a spell with a J, of course. Hamashal Junction. If we get closer up to our territory up here, most of these have gone completely away. But if we go a little further inland, this one, yeah, is whale. Spaniards call this Ballena Valley, and the Americans call it Whale Valley. Ballena Valley. The name has never changed, just how it's said. Why? Well, two reasons. The mountain behind Ballena looks like a whale, but also in 1890, when this anthropologist went out there, the tribal leader was sitting on a whale vertebrae. And he told him the story. Whales used to swim through here. And being a good anthropologist, he said, of course they did. Do you have others? Oh yeah, and shark. We have shark teeth too. So they showed them all of that. So, Sequan is where Sequan is today. Right? So, this was really important because they now have money, the casino tribes have money, and they want to start putting signage out there of what the Kumeyaay name was for the Sanibel River. If you've ever been to Mission Trails Regional Park, there's a place where it kind of makes it narrow and there's all the grinding rocks. We know what the name for that is. It's on here somewhere. Yeah, it's on here somewhere. They want a sign there instead of saying Padre Dam, because the Padre didn't build that dam, right? All the labor was done by tribes. So they want that kind of stuff to kind of bring themselves back on the land. Ocean Beach, by the way, was called People's Beach because it was where everybody could put their canoes in the water. It's the best place to put a canoe out. Point Loma is terrible. Sharp. La Jolla, Mount La Jolla, not good. Ocean Beach, really, really good. Really good. So this is one of the many figures in this particular report. Mount La Jolla, Mount Hawaii, that's the Boy Scout camp up there. So it's important. It's important for these people. They built canoes and they went out to Coronado Islands. This was a really nice day. So in 2003, I lived in Ramona. I was about to start a winery, and it was about to be bonded. I had all my paperwork filled out. I had 800 bottles of wine ready to sell. And what happened in 2003? The creator took my house away, and my wine, and 1,200 books, and lots and lots of stuff. And later my marriage, but that's another story. So we moved to above Washington Street. So this is in Mission Hills, where I grew up, sort of. And this was a really nice, clear day. So there's actually 4 of these islands out there. There's the north, south, and the 2 central. And the Kumeyaay regularly went out there in canoes. They went deep sea fishing and brought in tuna, and barracuda, and shark. Not just sculpin, which is all I ever catch. And not just kelp-dwelling bass, but deep sea fish. They went to Dana Point and went to San Clemente Island. And we know that from some of the artifacts that they brought back. So again, part of their cosmos was this ocean, because one of their creation stories says there were 2 brothers who lived out here, and they got really bored living on the islands, so they got in their canoes and they went to Ensenada. And that began that group south of the border, from 2 brothers. Which, those kinds of things always confuse me. 2 brothers, where's the woman if you're going to procreate? So I assume there must have been women on the mainland, and the 2 brothers got with them, right? It's kind of like Cain and Abel, that whole story. And, if it's Adam and Eve and those were the only people, and then they did their thing, then their children must have had sex with each other. I think that's called incest. I'm not going to go there. So the Coronado Islands. There are sites out here, there's just not fresh water. So you don't stay out there very much. It's just some of the quick place names. Amur, Sweetwater. Kosoy, this is down in Old Town. There's La Jolla, Land of the Holes. Land of the Holes. Makwasai, this is Witch's Mountain, which is called Table Mountain. 450 of these. Here's one of their canoes. That's sketched about 1850. That's the mission. I'm going to run through these. So, they did ground paintings. And this is the old word, ingenio. So some of these are obvious. These are snakes. It's a female snake and it's a male snake. And what they're showing is the universe. And the male and the female keep the universe in balance. The thing in the middle is what we call abstract. This is actually the Milky Way. It's the Milky Way. It's in the middle of the universe. And when you die, for some people, that's where your spirit goes after it's cremated. So when the smoke goes up and the sparks go up, that's where you end up. This is what we call Orion. They call Emu. It's a bighorn sheep. And he's up there running around, and there's people chasing him, and he's chasing the 6 beautiful girls. Yeah, across the sky. We have other snakes. These are mountains. That's San Jacinto. I don't remember what that one is offhand. This is Tecate Peak, and this is Mount Woodson. So it's a map of the cosmos and of their universe. This is not what you might think. It's actually the Crab Nebula. It's not a spider, it's a Crab Nebula. Which back then you could see without a telescope. This is out in the Ocotillo Desert. This was planned for one of those big turbines, wind turbines. And so we did a big archaeological study and came back and told the engineers, nope, you can't put that wind turbine there. And we worked with them and they moved it on paper before it got built. It's probably a calendar of some type. This is a rock painting of a similar thing. This is my buddy Emu. It's the name of my dog, by the way. So this one and this one is hunting. These are hunters, and they're trying to kill Emu. They're trying to get the bighorn sheep. This is his grandfather, this is his father, and they're protecting him. And they'll never get any closer. They'll never get any closer. Right? So when this first came up, it was that you could really see it on the horizon. It was December 19th, right before the solstice. Contact, we're not going to cover that. Mission San Diego. Yeah. So I want to make sure you understand a disclaimer here. This is not a Native American. I do not show photographs of Native American burials because I've been chastised for that. I'm empathetic. This is actually a soldier who was at Mission San Diego on November 4th, 1775, and the Indians killed him. They killed him. So he's got one arrow point here, and if we had his whole body, he has 2 in the groin. He has 2 in the groin. So I actually excavated this gentleman. He was a sergeant. This is at Presidio Hill. So I went through all the death records for Spaniards, and one of them talked about this guy in 1774, and they don't usually give you a cause of death unless it's pretty cataclysmic. And the cause of death was 3 arrow points. They said 2 in the groin and 1 in the chest, 1 in the left chest. So he's one of the 3 people killed by the Kumeyaay. I don't mean this badly, but when I show this and give you the story of some of the Kumeyaay people, they start clapping at about this point. Had it coming. He had it coming. Reservations, 19 of them. This is where I live, right off the edge of the Hopper Bend, which is Warner Springs. If you ever used to go to the Warner Springs Ranch Resort. So, Rock Hill Learning doesn't exist anymore. This is my website, and I'll tell you one that does. The San Archaeological Center, which is by Safari Park down in San Pasqual Valley, it's kind of a hidden gem. Most people don't know about it. It's where all the artifacts go. You get excavated in these private developments, and they're all saved there. But every so often, Native Americans will come in, and there'll be a notice sent to them, and they'll get to go through and take out the objects that they think are sacred, and rebury them or take them to their own place. They have no human remains here at the Archaeological Center. Setting a History Center is another pretty good source. And then the Verona Cultural Museum, I really like because I was involved in when it was set up, but also because it's not just a museum, it's about the current people who live there. And just like this wall behind here, they have a whole wall of Kumeyaay veterans, many of whom died during the war, the different wars, right? Vietnam in particular, because they were young men, not going to college, didn't have a bone spur, you know, whatever it was, it kept one of our presidents out, didn't have a Rhodes Scholarship, and they got killed. This is out of date now, and I'm not set up for right now for what's called OSHER, but I am giving a bunch of talks through the group called OASIS, which is Continued Adult Learning, and 2 of them are down in Rancho Bernardo. So if you want to write this down or think about it, instead of rockhilllearning.com, if you go to past, P-A-S-T, shadows, pastshadows.net, I've got a couple stories in there. It's my website. So Past Shadows, I think it has to be capital P, capital S, but maybe not, .net. And it'll talk about my upcoming talks and lectures and stuff I'm doing. Talks about my new murder book that's over there, stuff like that. So I'll leave you on this note. I know what I know. Who actually said that? Cheney. Was it Cheney or Rumsfeld? Remember? It was a mass destruction. We know what we know, but we don't know what we don't know. Some profound statement like that. So I'm telling you what I know. I used to think it was the tip of the iceberg of the Kumeyaay culture. I think now it's the frost on the tip of the iceberg. The more I study it, the more I go into it. I will leave you with this note, and maybe you will think about this down the road. In October, I had a new book come out, and it has nothing to do with Native Americans. It's about 3 unsolved murders in 1931 of 3 young women in San Diego County, but I think I solved one of them. And the Sheriff's Department thinks I solved one of them. So if you're interested in a talk on that in the future, because I have nothing better to do, I'm retired, come by. So,
That's great.
somebody take this away from me.
There are boxes of fresh, beautiful looking vegetables from Jimbo's that have been out here for the families to come and get, and these are leftovers. There's broccoli, there's turnips, there's radishes, there's celery. I have bags. If you would like vegetables, please help yourself.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you for
Any questions individually or separately?
So, I'm going to introduce a friend of mine. She's serving up experiencing lessons.
Hello, we are starting another spring class next Tuesday at St. James Parish. We are starting another square dance class this Tuesday at St. James Parish here in Solana Beach. And you know, square dancing started in the United States. It's done all over the world, and it's all done in English. If you go to Norway or any place else, it's all done in English. So we have a history here too. And if you'd like to hire, we have them, and we would love to see you there. We have a lot of fun, and everyone's really nice. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
I see him about once every 2 months. How'd you know him? This should be. He left the county and he started a person called Moody Associates, environmental consultants. Mainly to help people get through the county.